Good morning. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for February 10th, 2022. Let the record show that finance is still hard at work, although the rest of the House members may have disbanded for the weekend. We are the few, the proud, the strong, the workhards. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Lamar, Lambert, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're going to have several hearings scheduled today. We're beginning with the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. And members, as a reference, all the documents, all the PowerPoints that have been provided to us will be not only on the screen, but they'll also be available on dashboard for your reference. So are there any personal orders before we get underway? Seeing none, we're out of session, and we will invite the folks from Mr. Thomas, the Executive Director with Alcoholic Beverage Commission. I can't talk today. To come forward. Welcome to Finance.
There we go. That's better. Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Russell Thomas, Director of the Tennessee Alcoholic Beverage Commission, joined today by Aaron Rummage, our Director of Legislation, Policy, and Communication. We'll be presenting our upcoming fiscal year budget to you. Before we do that, I just want to give a real quick thanks to this committee for your help last year. We added some positions, asked you for permission to spend a little more money last year, and we were able to hire some new agents. We've filled those positions. Some of those are laterals. Some of them are younger folks that are going through the training academy now, and they're going to be a great addition to us in the coming year, and we appreciate your help with that during the last session. We'll just wait a minute while they pull our PowerPoint back up. Okay. Well,
we have it on dashboard, so if you want to, I'm assuming it's on dashboard. Then if you want to proceed, we will hopefully get the video online here in a moment.
I will. I'll look at paper and start talking then. So as I mentioned, we had some increases last year. This year, we have no increases to bring before y'all that we're asking for to add to our budget. The budget we're requesting in the upcoming fiscal year is $9,869,000. Quick breakdown of that. We're lucky to be an agency that's largely self-funded. The majority of our funding sources come from current services revenue, about $6.7 million in license fees, 1.3 in permit fees, and we receive about 1.2 in some enforcement tax apportionments. We get a little bit, we get some money from the Governor's Highway Safety Office, who we participate with in some combined public safety campaigns. And we have a small amount of revenue from the federal government for a combined program. We work with them. Kind of the bird's eye view of our expenses at the ABC. Of course, the largest portion of that are salary and benefits, $5.5 million, by far the biggest chunk of our overhead. Operational expenditures, other than that, total about 2.8. The things, the largest one of those being lease expenses and some of those common expenses. Don't go. We've been set a reversion target of $500,000 over the last few years. We have met and exceeded that, and we estimate in the coming fiscal year to again meet and exceed that reversion target. So those are license fees and et cetera that we collect that are beyond the operational expenses that we have. And that's separate and apart from any fines that we collect. You'll see over the last couple of years, we've collected just over about $1 million in fines a year. Those bypass our budget. That goes directly to the general fund. Give you an overview of our staff breakdown. We've got 90 positions. We have 3 part-time commissioners, 87 full-time staff. It lists currently 9 vacant positions. We actually have 3 or 4 starting next week, which will bring us down to about 5 and a pretty low percentage. I think we'll be getting down to about 5%. We're pretty proud of that, and we've had low turnover over the last year as well. Of those 90, about 30 handle our licensing and administrative staff, from accountants to people that review license applications. We have a law enforcement side that consists of both sworn law enforcement officers, agents, and non-sworn civilian inspectors. Glance of our activities over the past year. We issued just under 40,000 permits and licenses, fielded over 30,000 phone calls, conducted just over 8,700 inspections, conducted over 2,700 routine minor compliance checks. We received 779 complaints from the public and other law enforcement agencies. We issued just over 1,500 regulatory citations. We opened 484 criminal cases. Get a lot of questions about license growth, questions about how the economy is looking to us through some of the figures we see, and we just thought we'd share a little bit of that with you. We've got a diagram, we've got a chart here with all of our various license types, but you will see, and we are happy to see, that even over the slower year in the past year, we saw a net growth in our licenses of 5.8%. So we're still opening a good number more businesses than are closing down, and we're happy to see that. Here we've included a little bit of the tax information from our friends at the Department of Revenue as it relates to our businesses. See some of those trends that we've seen in our own communities over the last year. The months around the pandemic, a dip in some of our businesses' sales, and particularly in the larger cities in the state. But we're glad to see that those numbers over the last few months are up. They're up at historical highs. I think overall the tax collection over the last year as compared to 10 years ago is up 150%. Yes. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions that anybody has of us.
Thank you very much. First on my list, Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here on a Thursday after session. It's good to hear the 6 positions have been filled, the new positions that were allocated in the 21-22 fiscal year budget to hire new agents. I was just wondering, are members of the commission also agents?
No, we have 3 members of our Board of Commissioners. They come from various walks of life. They work in a part-time capacity. We bring them over to Nashville at least once a month, and then some conferences throughout the year. But we have lawyers, bankers, recently pharmacists, and 1 from each Grand Division.
Okay, and what about the, I guess, commission staff members?
We have 90 total staff. 3 of those are the part-time commissioners. About half of those are on our law enforcement side. In that, 40 of those are sworn agents, and the remaining balance of those are non-sworn civilian inspectors and a couple of administrative positions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. So during the pandemic, some of the restrictions regarding like to-go drinks and the like were relaxed. Have operations returned to pretty much business as usual? And like, are inspections being conducted, permit trainings being conducted in person? We back to pre-pandemic operations?
Yes, yes. Thank you for that question. And I believe when we were here last year, things were a little different, but this year things are, yeah, they are back to normal in most respects for us on our side. You know, we are back to our pre-pandemic operations, doing things in person. Our businesses are largely back. I think you've seen that we've seen net license growth, which is a good indicator for us. We're seeing new businesses open and more new businesses open than businesses closing. And it appears that they're doing well according to the tax revenue that we see, some historic highs, and we're glad to see it. It appears to be a good indicator of a economy that's coming back strong.
Representative Freeman?
Yeah, and so the challenges that you guys had during that period of time, did you guys institute any long-term changes to how you operate because of that? That would
With to go specifically,
just any of your operational changes that you have changed based on the issues from the pandemic?
well, as you mentioned, one of the things that changed during the pandemic was some expanded to go and carry out sales. Early in the pandemic, that ability was granted through executive order, and during the legislative session last time around, some of that was addressed by the legislature, and was written into statute. And in that process, there were a lot of things we were seeing early on, things that we were concerned about. The legislation attempted to address some of those issues, primarily low compliance rate. And we've continued to focus on that over the last year. Those rates have improved somewhat. They're still fairly low. Interestingly enough, we've actually seen a drop in our licensees that are offering those services. So it seemed to be much more popular early in the pandemic, and as time has gone forward, we just see less of that activity in the business community.
I'm just curious to kind of follow up on that. I know that during the pandemic, there was some online training for permits rather than in person. Is that something that you plan to continue, or are we back to doing strictly in person now?
It is, and we are continuing it. Luckily, the agency had actually developed rules governing those programs about a year before the pandemic. We were luckily ahead of that, and we're very glad that those programs were online actually a little bit before and during the pandemic. So it gave opportunities for a lot of folks to do some things online at a time when it just wasn't possible to do those in person. And we've seen those gain in popularity.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Quick question related to the reserve balance that is continued to carry forward for the state training and responsible vendor program. I believe that's roughly $6 million. What are the long-term plans ABC has for that fund?
Yeah, that's a fund that we use for some of our large, big ticket projects. So that we don't have to, come to y'all in any given year and say, oh, we've got this big project that's going to cost $4 million. We need money to do it. So we spent that down quite a bit in the period 2016 to 18. During that time, we transitioned from a very kind of old, at least in the business world, paper-based practice to a digital online-based licensing system on our licensing side. Since spinning it down during those years, it has increased quite a bit in recent years. We do have several projects that we have planned to come online in the coming 2 to 3 years that will again start to spin that down some more. But we're kind of at the end of a period of building it back up and have several mostly technology-based projects that are going to be spinning that down over the next few years.
Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the presentation. I was noticing on the graph, I think it's on page 8, it shows your tax collections from, looks like March of 2017. And then when we go all the way to March 2020, it's pretty steady. And then in May of 2020, it takes a huge step. Of course, I'm assuming that's COVID, but could you just speak to that deal, why you think it took such a drastic decline?
Yes, sir. Mr. Rummage, you want to take that?
Sure. Thank you. Aaron Rummage with the TABC. So we've been tracking this the whole time. When the pandemic originally started, we thought we wanted to see if, business would go down because we are funded on the license fees. So we have been tracking it the whole time. And the reason why we broke it down with the 4 big cities versus the rest of them, because this is where primarily a lot of activity, LBD activity occurs. And we saw that there was a lot of when the businesses had to shutter for a while. And so this also affected their tourism, whereas the rest of the state it was maybe 3 or 4 months and they were back to normal. But since the tourism was down, it greatly affected the 4 larger cities.
Representative Sexton.
So you're attributing it 100% to COVID?
No, sir. I think we think it probably has 2 components. It was in the cities they were locked down a little bit longer, and then in turn it also affected their tourism. We know tourism is a large factor in LBD taxes. For instance, Nashville collects close to 50% of the LBD taxes across the state, and I think they might have, forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's something like 13% of the population. So we know that tourism does affect LBD taxes significantly, but I think it also is probably the lockdowns, I guess. Yeah.
One more question.
Certainly.
On the flip side of that, you've got record highs. What would you attribute the record highs to?
I think we would have to say all indications are that consumption is up. When we track gallonage tax, cases delivered, they're all up close to 10%. So I think we feel safe to say that consumption is up. So that's probably.
Obviously, consumption's up. I'm just wondering why.
That's something that we could speculate on, but I think that's probably more for Department of Health, Department of Mental Health. We track our licensees and the behaviors that are occurring within the business community and what's happening inside those restaurants, the activities, whether it be criminal but generally that would be more of a public health matter that I think we'd probably feel more comfortable if they would comment on. So.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
It'll be interesting when we hear from tourism to see if their numbers are, if they track these graphs. So that could be another issue. Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director, and thank you all for being here today. I had some questions related to, I guess, some old legislation we passed, but I was wondering if you could clarify it for me. Out-of-state producers that are shipping into the state of Tennessee, are they paying the same enforcement taxes and the same taxes that we're putting on our brick and mortar distributors, wholesalers, everybody that's in the state of Tennessee? And specifically what I'm worried about, last year we adjusted our Wayfair threshold and we kind of looked at legislation that gave out-of-state shippers, distributors, people that brought products into Tennessee, we kind of honed in on not giving them an unfair advantage against our in-state retailers. And after talking to your office, I'm kind of concerned that there seems to be some exemptions and some workarounds that some of these out-of-state retailers are able to ship products into the state of Tennessee, and they're not paying our enforcement taxes. They're not paying the same rates. We're not collecting like we are on our in-state people. Can you speak to that briefly?
Yes. So out-of-state licensees that sell direct to consumers and ship into Tennessee, those licensees, they pay, those are, in our world, winery direct shipper license holders. They are subject to the same sales tax that any other retailer in or outside of the alcohol world pays. And to get a license with us, before we issue that, they have to register with the Department of Revenue to pay those sales taxes. They also pay a gallonage tax. They pay the same gallonage taxes that in-state producers, in-state wineries pay. So those out-of-state direct shipper license holders pay the same taxes that their in-state peers pay. For example, a California winery as compared to a Tennessee winery pay the same sales tax rate and the same gallonage tax rate. In Tennessee, there is also an enforcement tax, which applies a per case tax to distributors in Tennessee. And with direct-to-consumer shipping, those sales are outside of the three-tier system. They don't involve the distribution tier. That tax is assessed to the distribution tier for in-state sales.
Representative Ogles.
And so what capacity does your department have to be sure those numbers that we're giving are accurate? Are you able to audit? Are you able to backtrack? I feel like our in-state distributors who are required to pay that tax, they're brick and mortar, they're in the state, your people are walking in their facility. Are we not taking the word of some vineyard in California to just decide that they're going to send us a check? Are you able to actually verify through the shipping? And do you have the capacity when whoever's picking up that package, is there any accountability to those people that are doing that, whether that be FedEx, UPS, who else, who has in many ways become the major distributors in our state?
Mhm.
I feel like you're so good at keeping our in-state people accountable, but yet I'm afraid I'm seeing a very lucrative loophole in the system where if you're outside of the state of Tennessee and outside your immediate reach, that the temptation would be to circumvent those fees and taxes, and it would be very hard for you to have any recourse against them.
Great. That is a great question. Enforcing out-of-state entities is more challenging than in-state entities for those very reasons that you talked about. I'm glad you asked that to give me a chance to talk a little bit beyond the budget. Some legislation last year and some legislation pending this year has and will very much help give us additional tools to oversee that industry. To try to summarize it quickly, we saw some business trends change from when these original laws were passed. And last year, some legislation reforming that area is going to give us some better tools that just frankly fit that business model better. We found that over 60% of shipments coming into the state weren't coming directly from a winery, but through these third-party businesses that provided logistics services. Last year, the legislature created a license for those folks that went into effect January 1st of this year. We and our partners, I have to give a lot of credit to our partners at F&A and the Strategic Technology Solutions Division, worked really hard for us to get our technology in place in advance of that law change. And we've got 30 of those businesses, which was our estimate of what we expected. We've got them signed up. We've got them licensed now. And in a couple of months, we're going to start collecting reports from them that we are going to then be able to compare to some reports we get from other sources, and have some very strong data analytic tools at our disposal to make sure they're conforming with our state laws.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to reiterate, I just hope with our legislation we pass going forward that we're able to hold those out-of-state shippers, vendors, any third party that's handling alcohol. I just hope we're holding them to the same high standards that we hold our people in state, and we're not creating a system that gives an unfair advantage to out-of-state retailers, distributors, makers. I mean, all of them. I think one standard should apply across the board to everybody, and if we're going to tax everybody, it should be done evenly. But thank you for the great work y'all do.
Thank you.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to say that was a wonderful bill last year, and I appreciate all y'all's hard work on it. Thank you.
Well, in spite of the sponsor, perhaps, but anyway. Are there further questions or comments from the peanut gallery? All right, seeing none, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate the work that you all do. We appreciate that you're a self-funded agency. And we like that a lot. And also, as you've discussed, we're looking forward to ways that our regulation and our oversight can keep up with the changing in the market changes in the marketplace. So thank you for being proactive in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If our folks from TASSER want to be moving forward. Good morning and welcome to Finance. Thank you for being here pre-lunch on a Thursday. And we'll just ask you to, again, remind members that the information should be on your dashboard, and ask you just to begin your presentation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Cliff Lippard. I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, or TASSER. With me today, I have our Deputy Executive Director, Melissa Brown, and our Director of Administration, Michael Timmey. It's our pleasure to be before you today. As requested, I'll keep my comments brief to allow plenty of time for questions. As you probably recall, we were created in 1978 to serve as a forum for the discussion and resolution of intergovernmental problems. We serve a 25-member commission. We're very happy to see 3 of our members on the committee today, including Madam Chair. And the staff of TASSER is 18 full-time staff members, including 14 on our research staff, which includes myself and Melissa, and 4 in our support staff, which includes Michael. Over the past year, we've received requests for 8 studies from the General Assembly and our members, and those have covered a wide range of topics, including a study on the feasibility of a state gold depository, studies on water recreation resources, childhood obesity, state contracting and African-American owned businesses, right-of-way dedications, electric vehicles, post-award grant process issues, a comprehensive review of litter in the state of Tennessee, and at our January meeting, actually a 9th one at our January meeting, just a few weeks ago, a study on the tangible personal property tax in Tennessee. In addition to these studies, we have recurring reports each year, including an analysis of Tennessee Valley Authority payments in lieu of tax dollars, and a public infrastructure needs inventory for the state of Tennessee. We conduct that study with the state's 9 development districts, and they survey local governments, and we also survey state agencies to compile that inventory and update it each year. And additionally, we are responsible for preparing half of the fiscal capacity calculation used in the basic education program, the other half being produced by the University of Tennessee Center for Business and Economic Research. We do this with a budget of $3.572 million, and that's actually our request for this coming fiscal year. While we're not a self-funded agency, 94% of our revenue does come from external sources, and that's from TVA payments in lieu of tax dollars. Our appropriation request from the state this year is $164,600. Madam Chair, that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We appreciate your brevity. It's been an eye-opening experience for me serving on TASER. It's the one place that we have very programmed and intentional interconnection between our local governments, cities, counties, and the state. There's just a wealth of information there, and hearing perspectives from those entities, I think, is very helpful to the members who sit on the committee. And then I think that provides a big resource for you all as you are looking into issues that we continually ask TASER to study. Do have questioners on my list. Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here as well. I appreciate the work that you do. There's certainly great value in the reports that you give to us, and they go to formulate, hopefully, good and better policy as we move forward. So thank you. You mentioned 8 reports and then a +1 in January. Tell me, is that tangible personal property study, is that ongoing, or is that just started, or where are we in the process with that? And a couple more questions as well.
Certainly, Chairman. That study's brand new. So we were actually in the process right now developing the research plan. It was requested by one of our commission members, Senator Lundberg, and we have kind of a two-sided referral process. We have studies that are referred by the General Assembly, which are the bulk of our studies, but then the commission members can also request studies as well. Slightly higher threshold to approve those to be added to our work program, but we are just starting on that study. We expect, though, that's one of those studies where there's a lot of data available to assist. We're not going to have to scrounge for data on it, so we expect to have that study complete, a draft of that study complete by our September commission meeting.
Representative Hawk.
Thank you,
Chairman Hawk.
Matt. Thank you, Madam Chair. 8+1, is that a typical year? 8 or 9 requests, is that typical? And maybe some historical information on that, as well as what do you all feel your capacity would be if we've got issues that are burning within the legislative process? Thank you, Madam Chair.
So this is one of those "it depends" answers. It really does depend on the size of the study and the complexity of the studies referred to us. We like to use as a planning figure anywhere between 5 and 8 new studies a year. And if it's something fairly straightforward, like the tangible personal property tax, we can add that fairly easy. If it's a more complex study, like the 2-year study we did on broadband access and adoption in the state, that obviously takes up a lot more staff time. We couldn't do 8 of those studies, but it's sort of a mix.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tasser, good to see you. Just have a couple of questions with your indulgence, Madam Chair. The annual Tasser infrastructure needs survey is a couple of questions that since Tasser's initial study in 2017 regarding broadband, which I'm very interested in because still 40% of one of my counties doesn't have access to broadband. What sort of changes has Tasser seen in the state's broadband infrastructure? And is the state's deployment of the broadband infrastructure improving?
So we actually, one of the things that occurred as a result of our initial study in 2017 on broadband was we added broadband as a separate category within the infrastructure inventory. It wasn't separated out initially, and we wanted to make sure we were capturing that. We've noticed obviously adding it to the inventory and an immediate spike in reporting, but it has continued to increase. And but though we are seeing more needs that are actually more in the planning process rather than unmet needs as a result of the targeted grants towards broadband. And I'm sure we'll continue to see an improvement in meeting those needs with the additional funds that are being targeted for that this coming year.
Can you talk with us a little bit about the prioritization? Because tasks are like everything else, they're limited resources. So when you have multiple studies going on, multiple requests, then help us understand how those are prioritized.
So our internal prioritization, Madam Chair, would be for studies that that clearly meet our statutory duties or the purposes outlined in our enabling statute, which are intergovernmental issues. Now, it does get a bit more specific, and our purposes outlines anything that involves the distribution of state or local fiscal resources, the structure of state or local governments in Tennessee, or things that the state can do to improve the performance of local government and the connection between those. After that, our prioritization is largely driven by the preference of the General Assembly. What if we do request before a study be added to the work program, we prefer that a study be requested by both chambers of the General Assembly. That indicates that a genuine interest in it across the board. But beyond that, it's a matter of capacity and what more clearly meets our mission. It's rare for something to come to us that you couldn't argue is intergovernmental in to some degree, but it's a matter of how intergovernmental. And if when push comes to shove, it's the members have to decide which ones are more urgent in the eyes of the General Assembly.
We appreciate, and we know that there are lots of times when we're discussing issues in committees and so forth that Tasser's name gets thrown out. So, obviously, again, we need to just remind everybody that there's limited resources within Tasser and that there has to be a prioritization process. So, Chairman Williams. Chairman Faison, I can come back to you, or you
That's
can
fine.
just.
I'll defer to you.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Lippert. Just as a member of the TASSER, I just want to say thanks to you and your staff. It's they do a lot of work behind the scenes and answer a lot of questions in a lot of ways. Play the negotiator between members. So we appreciate all the hard work that you're doing. It's a very important part of what we're doing. It's great to come to a committee if members have never been there, because you get to see other electeds from all over the state who represent the committee and their own different counties or cities. I did hear you say one thing earlier about TVA recurring study as it relates to in lieu of taxes. Could you email that? Could you email me the latest one of those so I can read through it? I've never seen that. Thank you.
Happy to do that, Chairman. And it's just as a reminder, all of our studies are also available on our webpage under the publications tab, going back for over about 20 years now worth of studies. But I'll be happy to email you that link.
All right. Thank you very much.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One follow-up question I had, and I know Tasser's done all type of different studies and talks and committees about the different infrastructure needs of Tennessee. And I was wondering, could you just kind of share with the committee, what do you see is possibly the greatest infrastructure need in Tennessee? Is there something that the legislature needs to focus on, since you've worked with so many of the local governments, whether it's from roads to water, to septic, to broadband? What do y'all see as a TASSER group that is some of our greatest infrastructure needs?
So I'm going to give a general answer, and then I'm going to allow our deputy to maybe go in a little bit more under the hood. But since the very beginning of the infrastructure inventory, transportation needs have been the largest category by far. Other large categories include water and wastewater. That's why we were happy to see the the initiative targeting those infrastructure needs is a part of the grants that came out this past year. Beyond that, it varies by area. Education-related needs, education infrastructure, either new school facilities or additions or repairs to existing school facilities, particularly in high-growth areas that are seeing a lot of new students. Melissa, is there anything you would add to that?
I don't think I don't know. Is it?
No, there you go.
I don't think I can add anything. You may want to mention our special project looking at the effect of the pandemic on needs.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. One of the things we are looking at is to see if any of the structural changes that have resulted from the pandemic and the response to the pandemic are causing any shifts in infrastructure needs in the way local governments are prioritizing those, and that's ongoing.
Well, thank you again for being here. I think TASER, again, is a great resource for the General Assembly. We all come here. Our problem is the most important problem because it's the most important problem to the folks back home. But it's great to have an organization like TASER that can objectively look at both the problems and potential solutions and help guide us in a direction that makes the most highest and best use of Tennessee's fiscal resources as well as other more intangible resources. So we thank you for the work that you do, and we thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, Ms. Perry, thank you for being proactive and coming to the table without prompting and being ready to present for the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. So without further ado, we will just ask you to get underway.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Always good to be back with you. I'm Ralph Perry, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. And with me is our Chief Financial Officer, Trent Ridley, and our Controller and Head of Accounting, Joe Brown. We'll be pleased to entertain any questions you have for us this morning. I do always like to lead for openers by emphasizing the THDA receives no state appropriated dollars, and we ask for none in this budget. We continue with our practice. Yeah, well, I thought you would. That's why I like to lead with that. I want to emphasize that we approach our business in the same conservative and responsible stewardship of resources that we have long maintained. The good work of Mr. Ridley, Mr. Brown, and their team has now led us to chalk up 19 consecutive clean financial audits from the Comptroller's Office. No small feat given the amount of money that flows through our agency each year. We've also taken some important steps to realign our basic business model to make more use of the secondary mortgage market. And what that means is we are no longer entirely dependent on issuing bonds, issuing debt to finance mortgages for Tennesseans. And what that means is that within the next 3 or 4 years, we'll be entirely able to meet the demand for mortgage finance without adding to THDA's bonded indebtedness. I want to also point out that none of THDA's debt any longer carries the moral obligation of the state of Tennessee. This is Mr. Ridley's good work over the last 8 years, skillfully refunding older bond issues and removing over $1.5 billion from the state's moral ob and entirely onto THDA's alone. And this move into a different business model has also strengthened us financially long-term because it gives us 3 strong revenue streams: the steady long-term earnings that we realize from our portfolio, the money we will make selling mortgages into the secondary market, and the fee income that we then generate by continuing to service all of those loans. So how's our business doing? Well, since COVID, our loan production took a hit. Everybody's did. But I'm happy to say that even at these post-COVID levels, we're doing more loan production now than we were in all but a handful of years prior to 2015. We made some adjustments last fall, recognizing that the biggest obstacle we face is a lack of inventory at entry-level price points. And to help some of our buyers deal with a rising cost environment, we made some changes to our down payment program. And as a result, we've noticed a nice uptick in production since we did that in October. That's the blue line on that graph and the red triangle that shows where we are at the start of this year. On the multifamily side, you're seeing another helpful trend caused by our shift in our secondary market production in single family. As we need fewer bond resources for our mortgage business, we can make much more available to support the development of affordable rental housing across the country, across the state. We administer a number of federal programs on the state's behalf, as you know, and in the last year, we picked up 5 new ones, including the big rent relief program that you've heard about and the Homeowner Assistance Fund that we administer. And what's more, of the 10 programs that we already administer, 7 of them saw a substantial increase in funding and program responsibility. All this to say is we're grateful for the confidence that you and your colleagues and the governor have shown in giving us all this extra work to do. And I think our team has done a very good job handling all of it, but we are stretched thin. It has been a challenge. So later this spring, we will be requesting authorization for another 49 positions. The majority of those are linked specifically to these new and expanded federal programs. And as those programs run their course over the next 2 to 5 years, those positions and the people in them will leave us as well. The rest of the positions that we'll seek, we're looking to expand and reorganize our accounting division. They are taking on not just more work, but more complex work as we dive increasingly into the secondary market. We also need some additional help for our freestanding IT division, and we want to bolster our community programs division, which now has responsibility for over 24 state and federal programs. This will all be part of the governor's budget amendment, and we'll be back to discuss that with you in as much detail as you'd like to know about it. I do want to emphasize again, there is no fiscal impact in any of this on the state, as all these positions will be paid for either by federal funds or by THDA's own operating revenue. Again, we're always grateful for your confidence in us and the support you've shown for THDA's work. And with that, I'll pause and invite any questions that you have for us.
Thank you. And I'll begin just as a quick follow-up. You mentioned the new programs, the rent relief program. I've heard mixed reviews back home about that, about maybe the difficulty of getting the dollars distributed to those who need it. Sometimes I think it's been a communication issue. People haven't been clear on how to access the dollars or whatever. So can you help us? Are those dollars being utilized in Tennessee? And what are we doing if the answer is not so well? What are we doing to make sure that people who are eligible are aware that option is out there?
Yes, ma'am. We are redoubling our efforts to work with nonprofit partners, folks like Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise, for example, paying them to help us both with outreach and intake, recognizing that not everyone may have ready access to a computer. We think that will help us. In general, we're probably making $4 million a month in payments available to applicants in the counties that we serve. The 4 metro areas running their own programs are seeing more activity, as you'd expect, and we've actually transferred over $104 million to them to help them meet that obligation. Probably send another $45 million to those 4 localities over the next couple of months to be of help there. But in all candor, we are not seeing anywhere near the demand that was anticipated. I think our federal colleagues, with the best of intentions, were going off estimates, and they really awarded a great deal more money than we are ever likely to use. What I find in conversation with colleagues around the country, the states that are running through their rent relief money are the states where the government shut everything down and sent everyone home for 12 months. They have a lot of people who haven't been able to pay their rent. It really isn't the experience here in Tennessee or in most of the Southeast. But we have plenty of money to help Tennesseans who need this assistance. Even if some of the first round money needs to revert to the federal government, we have $308 million in round 2 that we haven't even touched yet. So we'll continue to try to serve those who are eligible. But I don't see any possibility that all the money assigned to Tennessee will be used.
And I believe you answered my second question in the course of your comments. So those dollars do revert if they're not used, and on an annual basis. Is that how the reversion works?
The first tranche of those funds, there's a reversion that's likely to occur at the end of September for what we cannot use. If I had to ballpark it, there might be 60 to 80 million that would go back then. But again, we have 308 million more in the second round that we can still put to work for another 3 years. So, you know, as a personal note, I'd have to wonder if someone still needs rent relief in 2025, whether that's a COVID issue or something else going on. Just saying.
Yes, I think a number of us would share that same concern. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I have 3 questions regarding low-income energy assistance program. Tennessee has received additional funding for the program through federal COVID relief to help families struggling with the cost of home heating. First question, how many citizens typically apply for the program? Has there been an increase in the applicants during the pandemic?
Okay. I'm not sure that we've seen an increase. More likely, we have increased the amount of payment that would go to an applicant. We distribute those funds through a network of local agencies, and they handle the intake and those payments. We'll see if we have some specific numbers in our report for you. But as it's explained to me, more often than not, these are just larger payments that are going out to individuals to help with those costs. And of course, part of the effort through rent relief is we help people catch up on if they are overdue or behind on those payments.
Okay. Madam Chair.
Yes,
Okay.
Representative Miller, continue.
Now, how does THDA usually advertise the availability of the program? And giving, the availability of more funding in the program, are you increasing advertising efforts?
We've been pretty aggressive with our outreach. Fortunately, in programs like energy assistance, weatherization assistance, we have a well-established network of partners who do the work on the ground, and they've been very aggressive with their existing customers and others who might be eligible. So I think we've done a pretty good job with that. We have noticed, for a variety of reasons, last year, our website attracted 1.8 million unique visitors. So I think people they know where to look for the information, and we have a great network of local partners in Memphis who can help us directly reach the customers most likely to need that help.
Thank you. Last question, does THDA anticipate any of these additional funds will go unused?
Not for LIHEAP, not for weatherization. No, I think that the main point of concern for us is rent relief. And there again, I think folks were just going off estimates of what was going to be needed, and they guessed low in some states and they guessed rather high in others, and we're one of the ones where I think they guessed high.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Lady.
Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Director Perry. Good seeing you again, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate what you and your team do for our Tennesseans. You mentioned, you may have answered this question already, but you talked about the $308 million. Can that be used to help low to moderate income homeowners who fall behind on their payments to make their mortgage payments during this period?
Those dollars cannot, but that's what the Homeowner Assistance Fund is intended to do. We only got the go-ahead from the feds to launch that program in January, and so we've started up, and I think we've already have over 5,000 applicants for assistance there.
Oh, excuse me, sir. And did y'all apply for that funding for that purpose from the federal government?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this was a big appropriation made last April. To our chagrin, it took Treasury, about 9 months to tell us we could proceed with it. We were ready earlier than that. But we think that'll be a big help. We can help bring people current on their mortgage without financial penalty or credit damage to them. If they remain in a hardship situation where their income hasn't recovered, we can even help pay for up to 6 more months of assistance up to a certain dollar amount. We think that will really help an awful lot of people who fell behind for no reason other than COVID cost them a loss of income.
Okay, thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I just want to underscore, I believe the Treasury delay that you alluded to was the federal treasurer.
Oh, yes.
Not our treasurer.
No, our
Tennessee
treasurer is a
treasurer.
wonderful board member of the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. And he's right on top of everything. Yeah, and I mean, in fairness to our federal partners, this is a more complicated thing to set up. It requires a master agreement that the nation's largest loan servicers need to agree to. And I think that took a long time. And then they insisted on reviewing each and every state plan. And we got late in the year and said, look, we're not going to launch this between Thanksgiving and Christmas. No one will notice. So they approved us January 4, and we started January 10. We're pleased with the way that's working so far.
And on the rent relief and this plan, and it's obviously very early for the mortgage relief plan, but what sort of percentage of those who apply are actually eligible?
For our pull-through rate, it's pretty much, we don't turn down very many people for eligibility reasons. Generally, the ones who don't make it through our portal because they live in one of the communities running their own program and we refer them over. We get a couple of people from North Georgia who applied and we sent them to our friends in Atlanta. We had some homeowners mistakenly apply for rental assistance, got them into the right program. But generally speaking, we're able to help just about everyone who has a legitimate application going through our portal.
Thank you. Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Ms. Chair Lady. According to, you gave some details on a wait list, and there were very few households who were able to move off the wait list for fiscal year 20 to 2021. What is needed, or what else can be done to help Tennesseans take advantage of Section 8?
On the rental assistance, well, there are only so many vouchers. And the demand everywhere in the country far exceeds the supply of vouchers that any of us have. We're facing the same issue that Memphis Housing Authority and MDHA and every other issuer of vouchers has. It's been especially challenging this year because even if we give someone a voucher, it is more difficult than it's been for them to find a place where they can use it. In a going economy where a landlord has 7 or 8 people ready to pay market rate for what's offered, there's less incentive for them to want to sign up to participate in a federal program. We, like many others, have stepped up some incentives for landlords to participate. We want to, and I think HUD's working with us to make it financially worth their while to do it, maybe make the requirements a bit less restrictive. But it's a challenge just to find enough eligible units for voucher holders to get, and there aren't enough vouchers for everyone who would like to get one and would be eligible.
Gotcha. Can I continue?
Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Chair Lady. My next question, I have 2 more questions, Ms. Chair Lady. What is the status of affordable and low-income housing in Tennessee?
Well, tell me how you mean that.
So, if we're looking at the poverty rate in the state, what is that in comparison to those who are able to take advantage of many of these housing programs?
Well, I think it's more expensive almost everywhere than it used to be. And the big driver in that is simply a lack of supply for homes you can buy at an entry-level price point and a lack of rental housing compared to the need. We're a fast-growing state. And, it's simple supply and demand. If someone can charge an extra $200 a month for an apartment, that's exactly what they're doing. You'll notice, going back a couple of slides, and I don't know if I can do that. There it is. You see that we've significantly increased the amount of resources we've put into developing affordable rental housing. This is tax-exempt bond financing coupled with non-competitive 4% tax credits, our regular tax credit program. So we're producing more units than we ever had. But the overall pressure on prices, either for purchase or for rent, we just have to build more housing. If you have 85 people today moving to the greater Nashville area, they've all got to live somewhere.
Oh, yeah, because we're paying about 2,100 just to serve here.
Yes, ma'am.
It's ridiculous.
You had another one.
Yes, I was just making sure I could. Well,
Mhm.
I'm assuming I can. My next and last question is, what age groups are you seeing applying the most for your vouchers? And on behalf of young people, do you see credit and student loans being a bigger barrier for us to be able to receive affordable housing or be able to apply to get a home or any of those things?
Well, the first question, I'm not sure if we have a specific age breakdown on our voucher population. I imagine that what you mostly see are single moms.
Single moms.
So, those age groups. As for student loan debt, it is a concern, and it probably does hold back young people who have a high debt and not a high income to go with it. One of the advantages of being able to add a conventional loan product to our mix is that they treat student loan debt a little more favorably for applicants. So we find that some will be able to more readily get into a home there. But that's a larger issue than we can solve by ourselves.
Closing comment.
Brief closing comment.
Yes,
please.
ma'am. Yes, because, as a young person who also is having trouble, and I'm thinking about the whole housing aspect, I think one of the biggest things why we get denied is these student loans, but it's forced down our throat, or we can't go to college and potentially get a higher job if we don't take out student loans. And so I would love if there in the future or relatively soon can be a conversation with all of these different entities about how do we allow our rising economic base to be able to take advantage of housing opportunities, but not further put ourselves in debt where we can't have those opportunities, double what a mortgage would be for rent. So it's a big issue.
Yeah, I think you have some regulators looking at issues of how one scores student in assessing mortgage credit, and a couple of other things like that. As I say, that's a larger thing than we at THDA would have control over. But what we try to do is have a variety of mortgage products that might provide a little more flexibility.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank y'all for being here today. And thank you for all of your programs, because I will tell you that you've got a lot of good programs. However, let me pose this question to you this way, based upon sometime what the information I hear in the district. If you were a representative, as I am, when would you tell your constituent to call the Tennessee Housing Authority or agency?
Well, it depends on what they need help with. If they're interested in home ownership, sending them to our consumer webpage, they can get information on the product, the down payment options available to them, a list of all the lenders in your district who participate in the program. That's a good place to start. And also a reference to the agencies that provide home ownership counseling that could walk them through each step and really prepare them for the mortgage application. Our Jackson office handles applications for housing choice vouchers, but again, that's an oversubscribed resource. If they're participating in some of the other programs like weatherization or energy assistance and such, they're probably already working with a local utility company or a community action agency, and that would be the place where we would send them. But if someone has a specific question for you, sir, and you're not sure where to send them, our West Tennessee representative, Doreen Graves, would be an excellent first contact, and let her troubleshoot and get your client in touch with the right person at THDA or our partner agency who can help you.
Senator Shaw.
Thank you. Just briefly, and I heard you answer this basically earlier, but do basically all of the participants that qualify for all these various programs, they do know what local folks to go to to contact you or whoever then, is that
Well,
correct?
we sure hope so. We never view that as a one and done exercise where we tell you once and trust you all to remember. We have an ongoing outreach and information effort, and I know that our local partners do. We want to make sure that anybody who's potentially eligible for rental assistance or homeowner assistance knows about it. They're certainly going to get that information from their loan servicers and landlords who would like to be paid. So we continue those efforts, but I can't guarantee you that everyone who ought to know about it does. Thank you, sir.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Representative Lamar asked the question I was going to ask about affordable housing, but if we could, after this, get together and talk a little bit about the impact I believe this affordable housing is going to have on the people in and around the impending Blue Oval City. And what that's going to mean for the residents there and how they could be priced out of the market of the very home that they're living in now. So if we could have a chance to talk to you about that offline, I'd appreciate it.
Be pleased to do it. We're already chatting with our colleagues at ECD about what they expect the demand to be. And there's obviously going to be a need for housing at affordable price points as part of that. And we're going to look forward to being able to provide some resources to help with that. Be pleased to talk with you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. It's good to see you. Appreciate you very much. I do want to say, for those members that don't know this, I do serve on the Habitat State Board, and THDA and Mr. Brewer have been a huge partner for Habitats. And if you have a Habitat in your district, it's a big thanks to you. So I wanted to ask you about the graph that you have on the one of my colleagues here in the House, former banker, has some concerns about the tax incentive, tax credits policies as we have for loans, because it's grown so much over time, and whether or not the trajectory of the cost of making these rental units staying low. I guess the question would be, do you think a continuation of these tax incentives for notes for low-income housing is providing the result that we'd hoped, and that rental rates would stay down? Or are you seeing that, like in my district, where somebody increased rent from $1,200 to $1,600 for a two-bedroom, two-bath overnight? And so if they're qualifying for these incentive programs, you would think that the rent would be more affordable.
Yeah, no one participating in the bond or tax credit program can offer any kind of rent like that. The tax credit program is an IRS program, and as you know, the IRS doesn't have a customer service desk. They have tight rules. They have tight rules, and both the income of the people who can live there and the amount of rent that you can charge them are set at the federal level. I would point out that nothing affordable is built in this state or any other without the support of subsidies like the housing tax credit or the tax-exempt bond financing that agencies like ours can provide. So to the extent that affordable housing is being built, it's through these programs, and I think they work very, very well. The tax credits, I mean, those are a federal issue. They're not on the state's book. It is often necessary for local governments to consider the property tax impact of some of these, just because they are obliged to consider the value of the tax credit equity in the deal when they're figuring the liability. That is a long and complicated issue, but it's largely been resolved at the local level, so it's not an impediment for us. And we're finding that, the favorable bond market and some of the changes that have been made in the bond program federally, it's now increasingly possible, at least in higher cost markets, to use bonds and 4% credits to build new developments. And probably half of that multifamily business we'll do this year will be new development, and a lot of it will be in our fastest growing communities.
Leader Lamberth.
Just want to thank you all for your hard work. I mean, you do a great job, and I know you began by saying it did not involve state funds, but it involves a great number of Tennesseans. And specifically, I mean, just on some of the comments that have been made already, I mean, I'm thankful to live in a state where, due to the legislature's hard work and 2 different governors in a row, I mean, you can go to community college for free, you can get TCAT for free, you can come back and reconnect. I mean, you can make choices here that do not put you far into debt, unlike other states, and you can take advantage of programs like yours to really get your feet up under you and be successful in a community. So, thank you for leveraging these federal funds in a very conservative fashion, and specifically on the rental assistance. I mean, I agree with you. I hope and pray that you know, that is something that's not needed down the road specifically for the pandemic, but it has been very helpful to ensure that landlords were able to survive this, because that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. That when the courts shut down, and I disagreed with that throughout the entire process, and barred landlords from even be able to access the courts on the landlord-tenant situations, then landlords were the ones that had to shoulder that when the government was the one that was prohibiting them from being able to actually access the judicial system. So rental assistance has been a much better way to handle that, and I appreciate y'all managing that program and doing such a good job of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. You mentioned a very good point, because we took a look at this at the start of the program, and you know, while everyone thinks landlords, they think of large property management companies, but more than half the rental units in this state are in the hands of what you might call mom and pop landlords, and they don't have deep pockets. And if someone says you can't collect rent for 18 months, that's a hardship. And you know, looking down the road, if we lose those landlords, we lose some more affordable housing. Or if a hedge fund comes in and buys up those properties, we likely lose them as affordable housing. So being able to both help the renter stay in a stable home and financially shore up, especially those mom and pop landlords, that's been a big benefit of the program.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to thank you too. I've had a couple of occasions where someone receiving federal assistance for an apartment, they've had some issues with the apartment. They needed repairs and all of that. And I was able to call THDA and get them assistance and get them help. And those problems were fixed. And I can't thank you all enough for being so responsive and helping my constituents.
Glad to do it. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, again, we thank you for being here today, and it really is important what you do for Tennesseans. As Leader Lambert alluded to, Tennessee taxpayer dollars are not involved in your program, but Tennesseans are, and you make a difference in the lives of Tennesseans. And we look forward to just continuing as with the rent relief programs, the mortgage relief programs, helping to get Tennesseans who have been really adversely impacted by the pandemic and all the ripple effects of that back on their feet. So, and still in their homes, and to find affordable housing. I think that is going to continue to be a huge issue, not just in the state, but across the country. And the inflation that we're dealing with on a daily basis is not going to help that at all. So again, thank you for the work that you do on the behalf of Tennesseans.
Our pleasure. Thank you all.
All right. We're going to ask Mrs. Howell, who is the director for the State Museum, and the folks that folk, maybe singular, that she's brought with her today, to come forward. And as soon as you get situated, just feel free to begin your presentation.
Okay. I'm Ashley Howell, the Executive Director of the Tennessee State Museum. I have with me Sabrina Hooper, who is Deputy Director of the State Museum. So just wanted to share with you activities of the museum. I'll be brief to allow time for questions. But overall, our budget submission only includes a modest increase just based on cost. We did have a focus on retention of current employees, and just listening to presentations, there's been some conversation of increase of employees. We are focused on retention of employees. So we're looking at funding for a couple of job classifications, but also we're evaluating each of our positions to see if we can do equity increases with the current budget. Secondly, I'll just call attention that our reduction would be in the acquisitions budget line. So this would be acquisitions to the collection. One of the things the State Museum is doing is preparing for a move of the collection. So this is also a little bit of a shift in operations. It's hard to prepare for a move and also acquire at the same time. So we'll talk about that shift a little bit later in this presentation. But overall, at the museum, we are seeing an increase in attendance this fiscal year. For the first 6 months of this fiscal year, we have welcomed 51,914 visitors. For the same period last year, we welcomed 22,115 visitors. So in the first 6 months, we've seen more visitors than we did the entire fiscal year last year. The pandemic has definitely changed operations. So that's just an example of how it's coming back. But since we have opened the new facility in October of 2018, we have welcomed more than 375,000 visitors to the new Tennessee State Museum. One thing that just the change in operations, we have escalated our virtual field trips. So we still have field trips on site. And we also have programs like our traveling trunks, teacher workshops, and other engagement programs throughout the state. So just a couple of metrics about that. Field trips have resumed for the first half of this fiscal year. The museum has served 4,218 students from 81 schools from 17 counties. Additionally, we've hosted 44 virtual field trips via WebEx to 4,291 viewers in 7 counties. So we definitely have seen a change in field trips with students coming to the museum. And if you add in the virtual learning piece and traveling trunks, the counties that we reach increased to 92. So we are definitely focused on where we serve, how we deliver our programs, how we can do this better. So this is something that we are continually looking at and tweaking. So in addition to school programs, just a little bit about exhibitions. In addition to our Tennessee 225 activities, where we feature 100 artifacts in the collection, the museum is also currently hosting the Best of Tennessee Craft. And this exhibition is held in partnership with the Tennessee Craft Organization and featured 75 works from 56 artists representing 54 counties across the state. This exhibition is on view through February 20th. Our next exhibition is Painting the Smokies, Art, Community, and the Making of a National Park. The exhibition will feature 5 artists within our collection: Charles Crouch, Thomas Campbell, Rudolph Ingerly, Will Henry Stevens, and Lewis Jones. And these 5 artists who painted the Smokies in the early 1900s will help demonstrate the ways in which art brought attention, activism, and tourism to the region, which culminated in the dedication of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. This exhibition opens at the end of April, not only featuring art and artifacts from our collection, but we're also working with the McClung Collection in Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in their collection. for a couple of artifacts. In addition, the State Museum is working with the Department of General Services to plan for a new collection storage facility. This is something that has been in the works. Revised plans with the architect with General Services are underway, and this project was approved by the State Building Commission in December. So this project will provide our state's collection the adequate storage, the adequate environmental controls. The collection is currently being housed in the Polk building, not far from here. And so we are working to essentially vacate that space. And if you've ever moved houses or have helped somebody move from a house, imagine being in space for 40 years. So we are preparing for this move. We've started on that project now, even though that move won't take place for a couple of years. In addition, we are also planning for a departure from the Tennessee War Memorial Building, as that building is getting ready for renovation. And that is the space that we have been in since the War Memorial opened in 1925. So we just have some big projects ahead of us and just preparing for these moves. So with that, I will say the projects ahead of us, the ongoing programs, the upcoming exhibitions, everything that we are undertaking this year, next year, and the coming years. It's just a great addition to our museum's 85th year as we are celebrating this year. And we continue towards our mission to procure, preserve, exhibit, and interpret objects which relate to the history of Tennessee and of Tennesseans. So thank you. And with that, I'll see if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Director. I just want to say, as a member of the board for the museum, I'm really proud of what you all do there. And I think under your leadership, the museum is moved to another level. And I think it's a great resource for Tennesseans. And I'm always encouraging people to, I know we have the virtual tours, but I think there's definitely something to be said for seeing it in person. And again, I know it's old news, but the work that you all did through the anniversary of the suffrage was just amazing. The exhibits were, fantastic, and there was a lot of coordination with other entities around the state. So you do great work, and I feel your pain when we're talking about moving from someplace where things have been stored for a very long time. I moved a couple of years ago from a house that I've been in for almost 30 years, and I still have boxes that I moved there, and I moved them again. They still hadn't been unpacked. I probably don't need it. But again, there's just a lot to sort through and a lot to do, and they're huge projects. But I'm really pleased that the acquisitions, we're going to have a place for the
Yes.
things. We can't display everything at once. There's just too much stuff. So storing them properly and all that is a huge issue for the museum to deal with. But it's important that we hang on to that history. So thank you for the work you and your staff, and just moving through a very difficult time when if visitors don't come, then they aren't buying things in the gift shop. There's just, again, a lot of ripple effects from that, and you all have worked through it and are coming out on the other side. So thank you very much for that, and I think this committee would recognize the job well done. Representative Garrett, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so very much for being here. I certainly appreciate all the work you're doing with the state museum. What an extraordinary building, and it's just a fabulous facility. So kudos to you and your staff. We really appreciate all that you do for storing all of our history in Tennessee. And speaking of that, I know that the Cook Chill building was damaged in March of 22, the tornado. In fact, it was a complete loss. And I know that there was $1 million last year of non-recurring dollars that was appropriated to help protect the artifacts that were stored there. And my question relates to that. And so can you update us on the current state of storing those artifacts, along with any issues that you're facing with the storage of those artifacts? And then do you have enough money basically to make sure we keep those artifacts safe and stored? And if not, what kind of cost are you running into as it relates to that? So,
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes. So our plans for the collection storage building changed in March of 2020. And let me just say, I'm thankful our collection wasn't there. And because the building was a total loss, I think we learned, but also museums have learned what kind of building, does the collection need to be in, and just sort of thinking about that risk. So, the capital budget, which is comprised of insurance proceeds from Cook Chill and working with general services, with that in addition to the original budget for the retrofit, that capital budget was approved in December, and it was just kind of stopping one project, starting another project, because the new building will not be in that location. So it is actually being planned for a parcel of land off of Ellington Parkway, some state land. So it is in a different location. So in terms of the appropriation last year and the challenges that we faced, the Polk building where the old museum was and where the majority of the collection is, it has some issues. We have water, so we have leaks, we have environmental issues, kind of keeping constant temperatures, which is important to the care of the collection. So we are mitigating that the best we can in the interim. So what that one-time appropriation was for was to help us kind of get to the project budget. So we brought in conservators to help us with some of the artifacts that were at risk because of those conditions. We are taking each artifact, and just to kind of give you an idea of the scale of the collection, our database has 124,000 records of different artifacts in the collection. So each of those artifacts gets looked at, reviewed, packed for the move, but also potentially long-term storage. So all of this effort we've started, and that $1 million appropriation helped us to get started, but also to kind of look at this project and say, how do we start? And how do we do this that's appropriate for the collection, that's not a strain on resources, and doing it methodically? So it's everything from the conservation of metal to a review of vehicles in the collection to to looking at textiles. And then we are utilizing temporary storage spaces as well. So we have converted the back of house of the Bill Haslam Center, where we had a space for exhibition prep and short-term artifact storage. We've converted that to artifact storage, so we've gained some square footage there. And we're also working with general services on other storage spaces just to kind of help us get to that point.
good. Thank you for that. What a difficult move to help preserve our artifacts. We really appreciate the amount of work you've done to do that. My last question, and this may be the $25,000 pyramid question, is when do you expect or anticipate the artifacts to be in their permanent spot?
So we are actively working towards this project. So I hesitate to answer that since it should be a general services answer, but working with them, we are in the design phase for the building. We have plans for the building. We are fine tuning that. So we are in the early design phase. We hope to have design set by the end of this calendar year to start the process. So just depending how long construction takes and going through that process with general services, what where I want the museum to be is ready for the move at that point. So all of this prep work that's happening, all of the conservation that's happening, we want to be ready as soon as essentially we get the keys or whatever the terminology would be, that we're ready to move in the first artifacts. And it will take us weeks, if not months, to actually complete the actual move. So it's a big project.
Good deal. Well, thank you very much for answering my questions. I really appreciate it, Madam Chair. That's all I've got. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Leader Gant.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Has the museum experienced any issues with retaining or hiring experienced and qualified staff? If so, how many vacancies do they have now they are trying to fill? And how is it impacting the operations of the overall state museum?
So we have 59 positions at the State Museum. Currently, we have 10 vacancies. Some of those vacancies are in some form of hiring. So either we have individuals who have accepted and ready to join us at the State Museum, or they are jobs that are currently posted. I would say the quote unquote great resignation has affected the Tennessee State Museum and has affected us because the competition outside of the state. So we have individuals who will leave for a higher salary or a greater opportunity. So it is definitely interrupted operations, especially I think about those individuals who have given so much time and effort in researching our collection, who are subject matter experts on the collection or Tennessee history. If that individual leaves, we're essentially starting fresh. And so, especially something like a collection move, that expertise and that knowledge is so important. We looked at this when we looked at our budget submission, and just to kind of give some metrics to this, we had 18 vacancies from June 2020 through October of 2021. Of those vacancies, we had 5 retirements, 8 employees cited low pay and no mobility. 1 employee left for just some time off to explore a personal goal. 2 employees returned to school. 1 left to run their own company, and 1 was unknown. So all of those employees left state service. And so I think that's just an indication not only of the State Museum, but also other agencies in the state and the competition.
Thank you.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask you, it seems like we kind of just cut the ribbon on the new state and museum, and we moved right into the pandemic. And I know that affected the museum so much. We're closed to visitors, and the events that we have there, the gift shop. How was that affected, which I think we all know, but has it recovered, or are we still recovering? How's it going?
So I would say when we opened the museum, we exceeded expectations. It was more visitation that we planned for. It's all we could do to, offer as many programs as the public desired, the number of events, hosting events, the competition even for available dates to have events. And you're right. The pandemic definitely changed that. So we saw attendance, once we reopened, it was about a quarter of what it was pre-pandemic. So the good news is we've seen a dramatic increase, especially from this summer. So of course, start of our fiscal year, sort of into this year, and which is a positive. We're still not back to that level. So we're looking at our advertising, we're looking at our outreach, we're looking at our programs. But I would also say, I have to think consumer preferences have also changed. And so we're trying to sort of gauge, what does that look like, especially with the programs. But I have to say, we're not doing as many on-site programs like lectures and that we were doing. But when we do them, the response is a great thing. We have an all-day event this Saturday surrounding the Tennessee Craft Show that talks about Black craftsmen in history, but also currently. So it's this great kind of sort of look at not only this historic look, but also what is happening now. And so it's an all-day affair, and essentially it's sold out. And we just ask for reservations. There's no charge, but so we're hopeful for what's to come.
That is wonderful. I hope this summer everybody will get back to normal and start really taking advantage of the beautiful things at our state museum. It's just so interesting. I have another question about, you have a YouTube page. I don't know if a lot of people know about that. I've spent some time exploring it. There's videos on there for children, which is just great. And I am going to share them with my 6 grandchildren. Absolutely. So those numbers will go up definitely of those views. But I wanted to ask you, do you have someone who's dedicated to digital media?
So we have, we kind of went right to digital media with the pandemic, but we added a position focused on social media when we opened, which has been very helpful. And it's another way that we can tell stories of Tennesseans and of Tennessee through our collection, through not only YouTube, but also Instagram, Facebook, etc. So that was a new position. And then we have also added positions in education focused on virtual learning and building the skill set of video. So we did that. We escalated that during the pandemic. So I would say that is a positive of sort of having to sort of shift operations. And so we're looking at those positions and how do we kind of keep those positions and not only sort of add to those positions and look at the job classification to really keep that expertise on staff, because not a week goes by we're not doing a video for a school, or we're doing a video for story time, or we're doing a video in our digital learning center. So we definitely have the expertise on staff, and it's becoming more of a demand for our staff.
I'm sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Just a quick question, and it's has nothing to do with what you presented on today, but it's something that bothers me. So one of the challenges that I have as a state representative who lives an hour away is, in 10 years of service, I've had one class come to Nashville. It becomes we have spent over $200 million on a museum, library, and archives over the last several years. Has the museum ever petitioned the governor as it relates to a fund where we could help pay for buses for kids? It's just very difficult, because if we really want to get kids involved in the civics process and understand what it means to be a Tennessean in our place as it relates to the United States of America, we have no better place to show them that than right here. And it is a little bit frustrating. I looked into it myself, and I thought, wonder what it really costs. But it costs about $1,200 to bring a busload of kids just to get them in the bus and bring them up here. Forget about feeding them lunch and everything. And so I guess the thought was, over time, could we consider talking to the administration about the possibility of creating a fund where schools could find a lottery, they could apply for the opportunity to come here if they really want to do it. So we're not giving them something that they really don't want to do, because I think it would really stimulate growth and learning in our students that we haven't seen before, because we've all had the opportunity to go to the museum and to visit our Capitol and to go to the old facility. And it was still very monumental time for any kids that you can bring there. But most of us have brought our kids, but or grandkids or whoever. But it just seems like we need to find a better way to make it more accessible, because there's nothing like seeing a virtual tour, and there's nothing like seeing it on YouTube. But coming and putting your hand on the stairwell and walking up the steps is dramatically different. So, anyways, just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will echo that, in that for someone who lives 2.5 hours away, and when we do have from time to time, I know there have been field trips from Signal Mountain, from the elementary school on Signal Mountain. But another problem is when you have that much travel time, it leaves you very little time for you to actually do anything while you're here. And obviously you can't know anybody that wants to be responsible for a bunch of fifth graders overnight. So certainly not me. But at any rate, I think Chairman Williams makes a really good point that's we need to be creative about finding ways to help more kids get here and have access and actually hands-on experience with the museum and the library and archives as well. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. During the Capitol presentation, we talked about what was going to happen with Legislative Plaza. How much money did we appropriate for that? Are we asking for that? Can you remember? Maybe about 140 million, something like that.
I would say that would be a general services question.
Yeah.
I think it is in that range, but I don't know the exact amount, because I don't want to switch it with
understand.
War Memorial. And
That's what I had a question about. I'll ask them. But the museum is going to have space there to display some artifacts. Can you talk a little bit about what those are?
so at this time, it's pretty early in the process, but we have been in discussions with general services about this space. And this is the renovation of not War Memorial, which is a separate renovation, but Legislative Plaza. And essentially about half of that space would be comprised of exhibit space that would be military exhibits. So we operate the Military Branch Museum now in War Memorial. This is a place where we can sort of expand that display, but also narrative that is still connected to the War Memorial building. In addition, the thought is we would also have display to talk about the history of the Tennessee State Capitol. So this would essentially serve as a Capitol Visitor Center to orient visitors to both the War Memorial space, but also the Capitol space. And we could lead tours kind of from the space. So the access into Legislative Plaza, kind of that orientation, and then going to the Capitol. So early plans, would include the exhibit space, but also some workspace. And then this would be connected to again, I'm not general services, but kind of a workspace conference center for agencies and employees to use. So it's a pretty dynamic space, and I think it's pretty exciting. And I also think these historic structures could benefit from having this visitor orientation center and then kind of sort of move to programs into those spaces.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sparks.
Real quick, just want to say I appreciate the work you do, and it's just a beautiful museum down there. Just to pick up on what Chairman Williams said, just share a quick personal story. I can remember being in the fourth grade. I was the one kid that couldn't go to the field trip at Sam Davis Home because I didn't have the money. But what got me so interested in state history was because I went to the field trip the following year and remember doing a book report, and it kind of planted that seed of being interested in history so much. Let me just take a poll. How many representatives came up here as in grade school? Leader Lambert, it's just, but it does plant that seed to get people interested. And I appreciate the good work y'all are doing because, all of us came up and I never thought I'd ever be a state lawmaker, going through that little field trip. But when I take them steps, I often think about that bus being parked there and the students I rode back home with. So it meant a lot to me. Appreciate the good work y'all do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Shaw is just pointing out that I believe this is the 85th year of the museum.
Yes.
He was too small to come. So, Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have a question. I just want to say thank y'all. The work you guys do is fantastic, and you do a wonderful job of leading your team. And my children are 12 and 10, and they, as you know, when you've had some of your staff show us around before, and they just love it. I mean, just to watch the look on a child's face when they're seeing the Tennessee Constitution over at the archives or any of the exhibits that you all have, and so much of the hands-on. There's just so much of it that you never know, as Representative Sparks says, what seed that's going to plant. But y'all do such a wonderful job, both of the events that you hold there, and then with especially the kids that come through and just kind of see what the history of this state is so that they can help plan for what the future is going to look like. So I just want to say again, thank you just personally for every time my family's been in the museum. And if you've not been there, if you've not taken the tour, whether you're watching this today or you're on this committee, please go down and just go through it. It's our state museum. It's our historical treasures. And it's in a fantastic location. So thank you for your leadership. Thanks for everything that you guys do. We really appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Again, I hope that you know from the comments on this panel how much we appreciate the work that you all do and the history that you are caretakers of for the state, for all Tennesseans. So thank you for being here today. We're going to take a 15-minute break while we wait for our next group to show up, and they're courtesy of Chairman Williams. There are some refreshments in the conference room behind. So if you haven't availed yourself of those yet, feel free. We're in recess until 1 o'clock. We are back in session, and then we're back out of session for our budget hearings. And we welcome Director Commissioner Gonzalez, who's going to talk with us about the state of our state financial institutions. Director Gonzalez, thank you for being here and for patiently waiting while we took a small break.
My pleasure always to be here. And with me today is Michelle Berry, our Chief Operating Officer, and Todd Staley, our Legislative Liaison. We appreciate being here, and just a few basics about our budget up front. Our budget request is for $31.3 million, 160 positions, no supplemental funding request, no reductions made to the base budget, no proposed capital operating improvements, no anticipated loss of one-time funding. We did not receive direct funding for COVID relief, nor did we redirect any federal COVID relief funding to projects. We did benefit from statewide projects through F&A like Microsoft Teams, rollout of SharePoint that helped us perform our exams remotely. And just as a reminder, we're fully funded by the institutions that we regulate. And let me provide some brief background information and speak to our goals and issues that we're working on. Of course, our mission, ensure safe and sound banking system, but put institutions in a position to contribute to economic progress. We simply call that regulatory balance. We try to tailor our regulation to the circumstances of each institution. We engage in 4 basic activities: applications to determine who enters the banking system, exams to determine condition and compliance, enforcement actions if there are issues, and consumer education, which is absolute key to a safe and sound banking system. The condition of banks and credit unions is good. They continue to serve the economic needs of the state. Our initial response to COVID-19 was to pause our exams for a brief time to give institutions the opportunity to focus on supporting their communities. They did that. We reestablished our exam program completely off-site, which reduced burden and cost to the industry because we reduced travel cost. And once we complete our downsizing of office space in the Tennessee Tower, our savings to include travel will be roughly $1 million on an annual basis. And when health issues are not a primary concern for financial institutions and regulators alike, we plan to engage in essentially a hybrid exam, maintaining an off-site presence during exams, but being on-site when institutions request we do so, or when conditions or issues dictate that we should. And one of our fundamental goals and challenges is to right-size our regulatory staff. The total bank and trust assets under our supervision was just over $70 billion in 2014. At the end of last year, the combined assets, bank and trust, nearly $450 billion. If we consider all the thousands of institutions and entities under our jurisdiction, including non-deposit companies, then our jurisdiction is about $500 billion in assets and thousands of industry employees, impacting essentially every Tennessee community. We supervise this essentially $500 billion industry, as I mentioned, with 160 department positions, $31 million budget. And while we will probably need more resources over time, we think that much of that can be funded through the efficiencies that we are achieving. Another goal and challenge for institutions and the department alike is cybersecurity. Banks and credit unions in general to continue to do a good job regarding IT operations and security. This has been reflected in our exams and cybersecurity assessments in 2021, but the threats are real. We want to continue to build on the relationship that we have with TEMA to further develop cyber exercises for financial institutions. Another important goal and challenge that we have in front of us is in the realm of digital assets. Digital assets are non-tangible assets that are created, traded, and stored in a digital format on the internet. Federal regulators have not yet developed a comprehensive regulatory scheme for digital assets, including cryptocurrency. Last year, after analyzing the risk of stablecoins, federal regulators suggested limiting their issuance to insured depository institutions. Most states have adopted a wait-and-see approach to virtual currency regulation. The Conference of State Bank Supervisors, which is the professional organization of state banking commissioners, developed a model law for money services businesses, has included a digital asset section that is intended to encourage consistency in state-level regulation. We're looking closely at that model law. We do license non-bank money transmitters today. Some of them exchange virtual currency for virtual currency. Others may exchange virtual currency for fiat currency like the dollar. Our jurisdiction is limited to the fiat aspect of these transactions. The community banking sector within the state is beginning to think through customer demand for digital assets, primarily through partnerships with established fintechs. Some banks are making investments in this area. Some banks have explored opportunities to leverage blockchain technology. And while there are some risks to certain digital asset activity, such as digital asset value volatility, cybersecurity risk, some cryptocurrency exchanges might be vulnerable to being hacked or being targets of other criminal activity. There's also numerous potential benefits as well, such as low cost, easy transactions, serving the unbanked, and being a potential hedge against inflation. So our department is constantly reviewing this ever-changing area. We're watching what the federal government is doing, may be doing. We're also having dialogue with financial institutions and working through risk issues. Our balanced regulatory approach applies to digital asset innovation as well. We work with institutions to help them innovate in this space, but try to do it in a way that protects confidence in the banking system. And with that, happy to try to answer your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know it's mind-boggling when you look at the growth and the assets that you all are overseeing from 2014 to 2021, over 6.5 times about. So before we get started with other questions, I think a lot of that growth, but I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong. We passed some legislation in the state regarding trust. And so this is banking and trust dollars. So can you help kind of differentiate between which is which, and if the legislation that we passed has made a positive difference for the state?
No, absolutely. The banking trust, the banking assets at the end of last year, just over 200 billion, about 207, I believe, and 234 on the trust side. So now you have trust company assets beyond commercial banks, probably for the first time. But yes, over a number of years, what this body has done as far as passing legislation, particularly in the trust area, has been very supportive. I think that we have probably one of the top 3, maybe the top 1 out of 2 states in the country as far as trust jurisdiction is concerned. So the growth just in the trust area, 2015, we had 25 billion in trust assets under our jurisdiction, and now 234 billion. We have other institutions that are considering coming here as well. So we appreciate that. We also think that our regulatory approach has been helpful. We're going to ensure the integrity of operations and the integrity of the system. But I just met with a group earlier this week from out of state that has just put operations in Tennessee, and really in looking at Tennessee and other places that they could have gone, they appreciated our balance in being able to allow them, to serve their beneficiaries in a way that makes sense for that institution and not a one-size-fits-all approach. So I just say we appreciate what you all have done in both of these areas.
Well, again, I think it's just a place that we've shown that Tennessee can lead the way. So again, thank you for the information and your leadership in that regard. Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excuse me. Well, Commissioner Gonzalez, good seeing you, sir. And, I was reading your bio before we got here today, and you've been in this department since 1986.
Correct.
Wow. I guess you've seen a lot of change in the technology of the banking industry and such. That's just amazing. And we appreciate your dedicated service to the state of Tennessee. My question, sir, is during the pandemic, the department established an off-site examination program. Is the department continuing to offer this remote examinations? And if so, how is that being accomplished and how's it going? Excuse me.
That's probably, thank you for that question, because that's probably the biggest change that has developed out of the pandemic for us. We had committed to Governor Lee right after he'd taken office to do more off-site activity, and we were going to increase our off-site exam activity, during this first 4 years in office. Little did we know that we would go 100% off-site, not in 4 years, but in 4 weeks. So our folks did a tremendous job in STS in being able to help us with the technology to be able to do that was critical. And we did that. Federal regulators did it. Financial institutions obviously did their part in being able to partner with us in offsite activity. I will say that when health concerns are not such that they're as much of a concern from an examination standpoint, what we want to do is engage in a hybrid exam. So, it still may be 100% offsite for some institutions because the conditions may permit it. For other institutions, maybe the conditions warrant us to be in for part of the time. And we do have some banks that say that they want us in for certain reviews. So we're just going to do this on a bank-by-bank basis, what makes sense rather than a one size. But it's just, you hate having to go through these kinds of situations. But the things that we've learned and the improvements that we have made, I think is really going to help us and help our institutions going forward to be more effective and efficient, because it has saved us quite a bit of money, saved our institutions money. Thank you.
Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question has to do with labor. With the pandemic, we've had a nationwide labor shortage, and I just wonder how your department has faced these issues in maintaining and recruiting capable staff.
That is a great question. And we've talked about that quite a bit, including this week. So because of the growth that we've had, we've needed more bank examiners. You don't have enough, when you go from 70 billion to nearly 450 billion, you have to build staff. And in particular areas as well, such as IT. Of course, IT difficult. I will just mention this. We have a couple of IT regulatory positions that we're trying to fill. I believe we interviewed a half dozen individuals. There was only one out of those half dozen that were qualified to be able to be hired. So, that's a challenge. Last year, at some point during the year, I remember telling the administration that we did hire 13 new bank examiners, but at the same time, we lost 8. So it's 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. So we still have vacancies that we're trying to fill. I can't recall a time here recently where we've had a fully staffed examination group in the banking area. The experience that we have, we do track experience. In the banking area, bank examiners, the experience level is around 8 years median. In our other regulatory areas, it's 16. So we're trying to do all we can to hire the right people, but then to retain them. That's been a challenge. one of the things that we've been working on with DOHR, been a great partner, administration's been a fantastic partner, is, to look at compensation. What can we do there to better able the department to hire and then retain? So that continues to be a real effort for us. But it's a challenge. There's no question.
It's definitely a challenge. And one more question. I was just wondering, does the department have everything that it needs to effectively and efficiently monitor the state's financial institutions? And with that, I think, did I hear you correctly? You said in 2015, you were managing 25 billion, and today it's
Trust.
234 billion.
Right.
Did I hear that correctly? That's
Mhm.
that's incredible in just 7 years. I commend you for somebody's doing something right, or you just make good investments. But getting back to the question, do you have all that you need to run your department effectively?
Yeah, I think so. Once again, the main thing is examiner resources. And, we continue to think about it. What we're trying to achieve is an appropriate compensation level so that we can do a better job of retaining. We are fully mobile working. So particularly for, as I understand it, in talking to our younger examiners, and really everyone, they like AWS. They like working from home and then going to institutions. So that work-life balance has been good. So we're looking at compensation, making sure that that's appropriate. But we have everything that we need if we can retain examiners. Right now, we have a good, healthy banking system. The real question is going to be, will we have the examiners that we need when we don't have a healthy economy and we have the next downturn and next recession? Because that's where the experience and that's where the numbers of examiners are going to be critical.
And there's only one way to get experience, and that's experience.
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
Takes 5 years to get them trained. So, you can't wait to a downturn and all of a sudden, try to hire up. You got to do it now while the sun is shining.
Just to follow up on that retention issue, when we do lose examiners, where are they going?
One of the last ones that I was just talking to our HR staffer the last couple of hours, and we were talking about one of our examiners had left. It's to a bank. So a number of them to banks. We've had in the past to accounting firms. We've had some to the federal government, to federal regulators. And that's a hard one when you have someone that you've worked with, sitting at the same table with you, but working from the FDIC or the Fed, but making a whole lot more than we are, but doing the same job. So that's challenging for some of our folks to see that. But, we're working on it.
Thank you. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for coming today. It's always good to see you. Not only has he been there since 1986, he is a graduate with honors from Tennessee Tech University and a fine connoisseur of Pal's donuts. I mean, not Pal's, Ralph's Donuts. But
Ralph's Donuts.
I had a sauce burger with cheese on the brain. But I was just a quick question. Something you mentioned earlier that interests me. I guess it sounds like the greatest threat to financial institutions could be cybersecurity and the security of the data, not just that we monitor, but also how those individual banks monitor their own financial security. It wasn't 10 years ago. No one ever thought about having an app on their phone and check and make sure their kids have money in college. But I guess the question is, what are you doing, or what are your concerns? Do you have the resources you need for that entity? I just wanted to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, cyber may be the biggest threat to financial institutions. So about three and a half years ago or so, I took one of our IT bank examiners and elevated him to a position that reports to me. He's responsible for all of our IT regulatory responsibilities in the entire department, not just banks, but also credit unions and non-deposit companies. So we've done that, and now we're building a few staff members around him. In particular, one of the things we're working on very hard is the ability to understand the IT systems of some of our largest and complex institutions. We have 3 of the largest banks in the country in Tennessee. A decade ago, that wasn't the case. It is today. So we work very closely with the federal government as far as IT. Not too long ago, all the banking commissioners were on a conference call to hear a briefing about threats to the financial institution industry. And because of that, we put out an alert to all of our banks and credit unions in the state because of that. So it's a big issue. It's something that we have to stay on top of it all the time. We've got to get better every day. Because, we have to win the battle every day. The bad actors, they have to just win once, and they're successful.
You used a word earlier, this last question, Chairman. You used a question earlier that I had not heard of until yesterday. A colleague shared it with me, but you said it, so I'm going to ask you about it. The number of citizens or percentage of citizens in Tennessee that are unbanked. Could you tell me a little bit about that? I was surprised to hear that there are some areas across the state where we have working age folks, and a large percentage of those folks have no banking relationships whatsoever.
FDIC reviews this, and they come up with statistics. And over the last few years, the Nashville and the Memphis areas are a focus for the FDIC. And we've made progress in the Nashville area. Seems like about 5.3, 5.4% of the Nashville area unbanked. But when we go to Memphis, and this is a serious issue, about 17% unbanked. That's a challenge for those families. It's a challenge for that local economy. So, we're having conversations as to what can be done about ensuring that we give opportunities to everyone to be banked and to encourage it. So, there's conversations and projects going on now.
Yeah, that data that you referenced, I heard for the first time yesterday, and particularly about the large metropolitan areas and the unbanked population there. But just as a matter of clarification from an uneducated guy from Upper East Tennessee, what as an unbanked person, somebody that's just putting their cash in a mattress, or what defines an unbanked person?
Right, they don't have a banking relationship. So how they maintain those funds, I've heard of all kinds of different things that that might happen. Maybe they have money orders, keep it in cash. It's risk to individuals and to families to that be in that kind of a situation. There are so many challenges and risks that come out of the unbanked situation that it is an economic impact to the state.
Thank you very much.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Lady Chair. And along those same lines, I've been here a while, and I've watched over the years, and I guess it was a little while after I got here when I really got interested in the financial piece and what you do. And I want to commend you for how great of a job you do with it. And we realize how important it is for the financial institutions to be financially strong for the state of Tennessee. But I want to thank you for working with all of us for those people that maybe we call unbanked, or the ones who are trying to become banking, if you will, whatever you call them. I really want to thank you for that flexibility that you've given to financial institutions to try to help people land on a solid foundation. That's been very critical, and especially in rural areas. And I just personally don't have a question, just want to make that comment and thank you for a job well done.
Well, I appreciate your interest for a long, long time. And this, this body, this committee, you've always been supportive of us. And we're a small department, one of the smallest departments in state government, but we have a huge responsibility. And it's people like these two individuals here with me and our entire staff that, we know what the mission is, and we just appreciate the partnership that we have with the General Assembly and with the administration and with financial institutions. I mean, we're all working together. Thank
Well,
you.
our nobody likes to see the bank examiners coming. They're not happy about that, but we never get bad press about your people coming. And seemingly at the end of the day, when it's all done, everybody seemed to think it was all for the good of all of us, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate all the hard work you all do. I mean, I want to echo what the representative just was saying about how great of an institution you run over there. It's very commendable. And, when I first got here and met you, all the great work you were doing, you got us through all the bank stress tests and all those things that this economy has been through. So we applaud the work that you're doing and all the staff and everything that they're doing. I do have a question around Community Reinvestment Act. Can you talk to us about your department's role in that, information we can get from that? How are we doing with that? So under your compliance division, where does that activity take place within the department?
Yeah, CRA is federal. So, the federal consumer compliance examiners will look at that. And I can tell you that the state as a whole, for many, many years, has a good rating in that area of CRA. And, I've heard our institutions talk about it before, about different projects that they may be working on to get the credits that they need to do that. It's an important part of what financial institutions do. So, but my understanding is that state as a whole is in a good position on CRA.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner, again, we appreciate you being here and for letting us take that short break while you twiddled your thumbs. I know you probably had other things you could have been doing, but thank you for your patience. And you guys do perform an incredible service for the state of Tennessee and for all of its citizens, just as being watchdogs over a huge part of our economy. So, and having been on the other side of being the watchee, I appreciate the way that your group always manages that as well. It really is a cooperative partnership kind of relationship that I think you work hard to have with the banks versus an adversarial one, which I think is, good for all of us. So again, thanks to you and all the folks in your department for a job well done.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee.
And we will ask Director Dunn to come forward and just note for his consideration that he is what's standing between us and being on the highway. So, Director Dunn.
Lady Chairman, members of the committee, I'm James Dunn, Executive Director for the Commission on Aging and Disability. I have with me Mason Devers, our Legislative Liaison, Rob Cagle, who some of you may know, a Legislative Liaison, and then also Gail Wilson, who is our Fiscal Director. And as a preliminary, I would just like to say that, Lady Chairman, I very much admire you and this body. I know the sacrifices that you make. I very much see what we do as a partnership with you. And should any of you have any a need, assistance with constituents or help on policy, I hope that you will call on us. We are always here to help. With that, I'll get started on this budget presentation. We'll move along and open it up for questions. We are the designated state unit on aging. Every state in the union has one of those. Largely what we do is we administer funds, resources to folks under the Older Americans Act, which are those who are 60 and older. We do some things for adults with disabilities. I'll go over some of the programs that we have. Some of our state programs, the options for community living, those are home community-based services intended to keep people aging at home longer so that they are not going to facilities and things, which saves taxpayers money. We also have senior centers that we assist with. These are hubs in the community, very important for services and just also well-being for our elderly population. And then we have the public guardianship for the elderly. We run that across the state. Of our federal programs, as I said, under the Older Americans Act, there are various services that we provide. SHIP, legal assistance, nutrition services, that is a big one. We did about a little over 3 million meals last year. I don't know that Leader Camper is in here, but I know that she has some experience with her mother and Meals on Wheels. We've talked about that. It is an important program. We have family caregiver support, which is some respite type services that we do. We also have the long-term care ombudsman, which is a patient's right advocate, an individual that goes into facilities to advocate on behalf of patients to ensure that healthcare facilities are acting as they are supposed to. And then transportation services, and we do some things on elder rights as well. Wanted to share with you a slide here on senior center grants. And first and foremost, just say thank you. I look forward to getting out into your districts, and I hope you'll invite us. And anytime you do, we will get out there. But historically, what had been done was there was money allocated for accredited institutions. I think there's 8 of those across the state. The vast majority of our institutions don't have accreditation. The finance committee decided what it would do rather than doing a grant for these 8 separate senior centers is to spread the money across the state. So they tasked the Commission on Aging and Disability with developing a competitive grant process, which we did. And I am proud to say that in doing so, we served over 59 counties. 80 separate institutions got a grant of $5,000. We will be doing some auditing on that and look forward to coming back to you next time to let you know how that money was used and whether or not that program was successful. We believe that it will be. Our nutrition program, as I said, we have served over 3 million meals, and we served more recently, 25,000 folks, a little bit over that, almost 30,000 folks. The number of recipients has dipped just a little bit. I think during the pandemic, there were more people who were homebound and needed more delivery of meals. So the number has dropped a little bit. I will tell you also on an important note, we right now have set as a standard cost $7 reimbursement, but the rate of meals right now with inflation is up somewhere around $8.50 a meal. So we are looking at possibly if there's some sort of way to assist these folks going forward, how we may do so. Right now, everyone continues to operate successfully despite that change in pricing. The SHIP program, a lot of people don't know that we have this, but the SHIP program actually assists Medicare recipients for enrollees, new enrollees, and moreover, for existing enrollees to get better cost savings programs. We are number 1 in the country in this program, and as of last year, saved the taxpayers or those recipients a little over $5 million in their plans. I want to talk about some of the budget requests. First and foremost, I want to thank the governor for taking our aging population very serious. I know a lot of you may know this. We have 1.2 million people who are age 60 and older in the state of Tennessee. I use that figure because under the Older Americans Act, those are the folks that we serve. That age is by definition who we serve under the Older Americans Act. That's about a seventh of the state. In any event, let's see, we've got 28 million state roughly, 52 roughly federal, interdepartmental 482,000 for a total of about 81 million. Of the expansions, there's 10.4 million in there for the options program. That is to clear the waiting list. And then there was a caregiver rate increase. I want to talk to you about that. There's a little over $1 million put in there for that. TennCare runs the Choices program, which is similar to the options program, but different. The Choices program that TennCare runs is Medicaid based. It is for people who need a higher level of care, and it is medically evidence based. Options is survey based. So they're two different things. In any event, the same provider network is operated through our AAAD systems across the state. And when TennCare raised its rate, of course, it impacted what we do, same services, same providers. So we increased our rates to follow for the same services to $21.32 per hour. Be happy to answer any more questions about that at a later point. And then we also have set aside roughly $1 million for some unlicensed facility legislation. Conversations are undergoing on that. Look forward to telling you more about that at a later point. We can move on to the next slide here. I just want to show you a map. This is kind of relative of where we are. I have a Region 4 call every Friday with my counterparts in the other states, which I think is important because I think we need to start looking outward as to what other states are doing and what people are doing across this country so that we can really become a leader on our aging population. Those in blue are commissions, that's us. Those in red are departments. Those in green are divisions of departments, and these are the state units on aging. We are the only commission here. As far as funding, we're close on some of these. Keep in mind, some of these have their Medicaid units combined with their state units on aging. Some of them do the adult protective services. We don't hear adult protective services is with human services in Tennessee, of course. This map just shows you once again, there are 2 states in the union that are commissions. We are one, Idaho is the other. The remaining states are all either departments or divisions of departments. Just wanted to give you a visual on that. Let's see, wanted to talk to you a little bit about where we are. Our budget, I mean, it has doubled in 2 years almost. It's gone up significantly. Our labor has remained relatively flat. Now, a lot of that is federal dollars, and we can get into that. And whether or not that will be sustained remains to be seen. But the budget has grown substantially on the federal side in particular. I did put in the budget a request for a research and development consultant. This $150,000 includes fringe benefits. It's really at the top of the line. We wouldn't pay, close to that, but we put that in there because we do a lot of things. For example, we got 3 legislative task forces tied to us, one on elder abuse, another on palliative care, and then we have another one on Alzheimer's. We also do resource mapping to determine grant funding across the state among all the departments and agencies that impact our aging population. So we do a lot of things like that, but we don't have someone per se who is doing research like you might have with TASR or THDA and some of these other entities, even the comptroller now, who's been very helpful on elder abuse research, by the way. That concludes our presentation. Just want to open it up now for questions. Should you have any, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee?
Thank you, Director Dunn. First on my list, Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Director Dunn, it is good to see you here today.
It is good to see you, sir.
So for those that it's been a few months since we've seen him, but for those that don't recognize Director Dunn, he was chief advisor to the majority leader not that long ago and did a fantastic job of that and serving this body in the caucus and are doing a fantastic job in your role now. So with that, I get the first question.
Very good.
And it is this. After the settlement of 2 related Chancery Court cases a few years ago, the Commission on Aging was charged with administering a $36 million grant fund for senior affordable housing, dental, legal assistance, and transportation. Yeah. I know this is a fund that you're very well familiar with. and just how much of the 36 million has been distributed to date, and did the pandemic hinder the commission in any way in awarding any of these funds and implementing their program?
So the senior trust, actually, it came out of that case with Florida, and Bob Cooper at the time, who was Attorney General, had an agreement with Jim Shulman, who was my predecessor, and then also Chancellor Lau. And what happened was they used those funds basically to set up what we otherwise would with a AAAD, and to administer those funds on a contract basis with various not-for-profits across the state, primarily out of Davis County. In any event, when I came on board, I asked Chancellor Lau to wind that down. She has agreed to that, and that matter has been settled. I always felt, if I might say so respectfully, Mr. Leader, that those funds really should have been administered through the General Assembly. But nevertheless, that is how they were administered. That is behind us. Those funds did help a lot of people, I will say that. But I'm very much a fan of, rather than administering these things through the courts, administer them through you guys who represent the constituents. So thank you for the question, sir. And
Thank
that
you,
is my
Director.
state representative, by the way. And I'm a big fan, and I'm glad you're running again because we need you.
Thank you both on that and the other. But again, just good to see you back in the House, and we all appreciate the job you're doing over there. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. You mentioned in your slide about the senior centers. I'd like to go back to that just a bit, as you know, that was an idea that came from this body for just hopefully a better distribution of those funds across the state. I know that there was some angst for people who had previously just had an expectation of getting that check. And, you know, when that didn't happen, there obviously were some concerns. But can you talk to, and I know you could tell us who got them, but at this point, it's too early to know how they were used and if they were used well and that sort of thing. But this time next year, I would hope that we would have that information, that you would have that to share with us. But help us understand, for those of us who have senior centers who maybe, you know, were not part of the grantee process, either under the old methodology or the new, how our senior centers and our districts, how they would find out about the grants, and what that process would be for their application.
Sure. Sydney, who works in our office, noticed well, I refer to them as state-funded senior centers. And the reason I say they're state-funded, many of these places are organized under a county, city, receive government funds. Our AAADs, some of the funds that we push down go out to these groups. But basically, we use the criteria that ECD uses for distressed counties and so on and so forth. And we attach certain points to that. We also attached certain points to if you received a letter from a state representative in support, state senator in support, and really try to be objective about that. So not everyone got one. I'm sad to say, Mr. Leader, or excuse me, Chairman, that we didn't get one for Chattanooga, but we didn't get one for Leader Lambert either. But I think what that says is that your counties are, in all seriousness, doing very, very, very well. Most of the money really went to these places that really, really needed it. And when you look across Tennessee and you get out there into many of the communities that a lot of you all represent, you know, there are just not a lot of resources out there. I mean, Representative Shaw, we got a senior center in Jackson, and we've tried to help them a little bit. You know, it's the only one there. These often are locations where we're literally feeding people on fixed incomes at times that, if not but for the senior center, would not have a place to get meals, to socialize, to learn about services, and to be around one another. They otherwise a lot of times are isolated. So it's very important to the community. We will continue to reach out. We reached out to every member here. We sent a letter to everyone. I think we got out to maybe 20 or 25 districts, in fact, to actually deliver checks and meet with people, talk to the senior center directors and folks out in the community. We're going to do more of that. But we will be sure. If you put it in there again, we'd be happy to administer that. We do think it was a good thing. And we will, as we did last time, notice all of our members and all of the senior centers across the state as to the process going forward.
Thank you again, and I'm not complaining that Hamilton County didn't get one. I just want to make sure that all the centers across the state, know that there's a new game in town, if you will, and how to go about it. So I appreciate the communications effort that's gone underway, and hopefully we'll see maybe more grant requests for these coming budget dollars. Next on my list is Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Commission on Aging, as I understand it, was awarded $28.4 million through the American Rescue Plan. And I'd like to know, can the Commission detail the programs which are utilizing that funding?
Absolutely. The various programs that I told you under the Older Americans Act, we are statutorily required to deliver services under those. Largely what we do with respect to that is we are a pass-through. There are 9 AAADs across this state. They are all tied, or primarily tied, to economic development districts, one a human resource agency, and one actually is the Shelby County government. But the AAADs really further contract with sub-providers on these services. And what we've done with these funds is we have allocated them for that reason for our AAADs to pass down through those programs. Our ARP funds, different from a lot of the other departments and agencies, we are advised anyway, are going to be in existence, for some period of time, not scheduled to expire in 2024, like a lot of others are. So. But anyway, under the Older Americans Act, and Gail, if you want to speak more to this, please do so. But we have various categories of funding for various services that we offer. I mean, we can go through these, one by one, but Title 3B support services, congregate meals, home delivered meals. Title 3D, disease prevention and health promotion, family caregiver support, long-term care ombudsman, elder abuse, nutrition service incentive program. We have the SHIP program, that's the State Health Insurance Assistance Program, Medicare Improvements for Patients and Providers Act program, lifespan respite, Alzheimer's disease program initiative. What else do we have, Gil? We got a lot of things. I'm sorry, I've been here for 6 months, so.
I've just been here a little, sorry.
State your name for the record.
Your microphone, and if you would state your name for the record, please.
All right. Thank you. My name is Gail Wilson. I'm the finance director for TCAD. I've just been here barely a little bit longer than James myself. I can speak to the ARP funding, and that is a supplement for the Older Americans Act. So those funds are being used for those same purposes. They're following the same funding formula that we use to distribute the Older Americans Act funding. So the majority of it is going towards nutrition. And then we have our home and community-based services, which are homemaker personal care, and some even going towards evidence-based programming in ombudsman.
That's an important point. Y'all may want to know this. I'll expound on it a little bit. We do some homemaker and personal care stuff through the Older Americans Act funding. That is federal funding, and the reason why that's important for me to tell y'all that is because we also do some of that through options, which is purely state funded. So anyway.
Thank you. And want to shift to another area, one that you mentioned, the congregate meal locations.
Yes, sir.
Has that started reopening to more pre-pandemic levels? And lastly, have the home delivered meal programs ramped back up as well? Thank you.
Yes, we are fully back into effect on both counts. I will tell you, we have pushed so many resources through because of the federal dollars that have come down. It has been a challenge to keep up, right? And then you have nutrition standards that you have to comport with under federal guidelines. So there is always that challenge. A lot of our senior centers in different places are helpful with that. We have different programs doing different things at the local level. At one point of time, actually resources were used with restaurants in rural areas to also assist. But again, the cost of the meal that we cap is $7. And when you look at transportation, when we're delivering these meals, that is, when you look at transportation and labor, the cost actually is around $8.60. So for a lot of people, that's been a deterrent. But in some cases, for those restaurants, that was helpful. We do want to be careful to not do anything that would inadvertently interfere with the private sector industry. But at one point of time, we did use some of those services with restaurants in our rural communities. But we are ramped up, sir, fully. As a matter of fact, y'all have any places in your district where you need help with meals and you're not getting them, or you hear from a senior center, let us know. We do have standards, so a lot of times places deliver meals might want to do their own thing, but we're happy to help with that.
Representative Campbell?
One more just came to mind.
Yes, sir.
Has your agency been involved with the My Ride program, or is that not within your purview? And if you are involved, is that being phased out, or what has happened? Seems like that was on hold or something changed in my home county.
So My Ride is a program that was created, I don't know, about a year ago, maybe. It's been longer than that. It's anyway a few years, however long. It's a great program. What that program is it assists, enables volunteers to tailor, their driving times with our elderly people when you're taking them somewhere, which is important because a lot of the public transportation, is going from A to B, right? And they're just picking up people in between. And we often hear that elderly folks are being left behind or somebody missed appointments, so on and so forth. Whereas with this My Ride, because it's tailor made, people are generally on time and everything is on schedule. So the My Ride program is up and running in all 9 of our AAADs. And we do have funding for that. And our traditional transportation funding under the Older Americans Act also can be used for that. Now, we have different things going on in different AAADs, and in some cases, the human resource agencies themselves are contracting their own transportation. Some have chosen to get more engaged in My Ride, others have not, but it's a fantastic program. And I would advocate that it continues to keep going. We got a great video on this, Representative. Be happy to stop by your office and show you a little bit more about it. And if you need some help in the district, if y'all want to get that vamped up a little bit more, we'd be happy to work with you.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And welcome, I guess, Director Dunn. You run a commission. I'm really wanting to call you Commissioner, but I guess Director is the appropriate term. The governor proposed a budget increase of $10.4 million in recurring funds to eliminate the wait list for the Options Community Living Program, and another $1.25 million reoccurring for pay increases for direct service providers. Can the commission provide some information on how quickly this wait list will be eliminated or drawn down? And then do you think it's sufficient, the DSP increase in pay, do you think that's sufficient to maintain the needs of the pool?
So we increased the rate to $21.33, I think, per unit hourly rate. Okay. And out of that rate, the caretaker is paid. The way that we do that when we contract with our AAADs who further subcontract with the providers, we don't dictate what the caretaker is paid, right? So it's a little different across the board as long as it's up to that cap amount. TennCare with Choices does it a little bit differently. They are requiring that the caretaker be paid a specified amount of $12.50 out of that $21.30. And we all across the board are experiencing a provider shortage. We just are. Most of these people are paid $10 to $13 an hour, and it's hard to get them. I'm hearing on a regular basis that providers are having a difficult time to hire people. Matter of fact, Madam Chairman has a bill, I think, to study the provider network, not only across this home community-based stuff, but in the healthcare sector as well. So we need to start doing more, I believe, Representative, with respect to educational incentives or anything that we can, from CNA to RN type programs, whatever we can do to help the industry get more caretakers and to help out with that. One of the things that that TennCare does that we will be looking into doing, if the General Assembly is so gracious and keeps this money intact in the budget, will be to do more self-directed care. Because if there's not enough caretakers in the provider network, we will have to do that. And self-directed care, what I'm saying to you, as with our respite program, is a service where the beneficiary has the flexibility to determine what provider that they will use. When you work through a AAAD, they have a select providers, and you have to choose from that list. So if you have the flexibility and you could choose, then there's an opportunity with the right paperwork, the right contracting, that you can use folks that may be in your family or, you know, your neighbors or whatever. And as long as that is accounted for appropriately, that is one more way to add providers to the network for the home community-based services. So there's a lot to be worked out, Representative. That's a big question. I believe that we can do it. I don't think any challenge is too big as long as people are willing to work together. We do have people who need these services very much. We have a waiting list of I think nearly 3,000 folks, and we serve, you know, almost that every year. Now we get $9 million for options. So when you put this money on there, it's going to double the options program. But if we can keep people aging at home well longer, that's the freedom that they want. They don't want to go to institutions. It costs more money for everybody when they do that. And so to me, this is sort of an empowerment thing. So I'm very thankful that the governor would put it in the budget, and I hope that y'all will keep it there.
Representative Uggles?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One follow-up question. I see on your spreadsheet, there's a line item for elder and vulnerable adult abuse. Does the commission have any law enforcement capacity? Do you have any, have you been given any authority to actually, it just seems like most agencies in the state have various people on staff that have law enforcement capacity. Almost everybody that's come before this panel seems to have people on staff, and I was just wondering if you could speak to that briefly.
Thank you for the question, Representative. What I would tell you is that we do not have any law enforcement authority. We are running right now a strike force on unlicensed facilities. When I first came on board, the governor, they asked us to do so. It involves the Department of Health, Human Services, the TBI, TennCare, and others. And basically, we're assessing situations where you have an elderly person in a home. Maybe the caretaker was doing it the right way, and then neglect ensued, and then abuse ensued, or we have outright malicious people who are out to just hurt folks. In the residential setting, this stuff is, unless it's a criminal activity in excess, it's really not a penalty. The penalty for operating an unlicensed facility is a Class B misdemeanor that doesn't really carry much time. But even if it did, we can't go into the home because we don't have calls. Adult Protective Services currently does some of that right now out of DHS. But that statute with Adult Protective Services hasn't been changed since 1978. There's two criteria that must be met in order for investigation to ensue. Number one, that the culprit is the caretaker. Number two, that government funds are involved. There's an enormous amount of activity out there that's happening where people are subject to financial exploitation. They're being abused. I mean, you got to think about this. When you get older, you know, you can become more childlike. And when you don't have family around you and you don't have the support infrastructure, and the people that are taking care of you are people who don't have your best interests in mind, we're talking about a real bad situation. So this is one of the things with the unlicensed facility legislation that we had talked about looking at a way to regulate some of this in a residential setting. And the other beauty of that is because there is a provider shortage, if we could empower the community to take care of its own elderly people in this way, similar to what we do with DID and mental health, with group home type situations, we could expand the providers, I think, overnight. And at a later point of time, if this General Assembly so choose, if it was in compliance with the home community-based settings rule, you could actually use Medicaid diversion dollars to further help out that program. But that's a different matter. I think to keep it non-medical would be the way to go. Anyway, you asked me a question, which was, do we have law enforcement capacity? And I went a little bit far on this, so thank y'all for indulging me.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was about to leave. I was supposed to be somewhere 5 minutes ago, but congratulations
Thank you,
on
ma'am.
your position. You have jumped right in, doing a great job. Really appreciate it. I was going to ask about the unlicensed facility and just kind of get you to expound a little bit more on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, so as I just said, I think there's a great need right now to regulate something. In talking with all of those entities and talking with others, one of the ideas was to take something called RHAs that the Department of Health currently licenses, or residential homes for the aged, to grandfather them in, and then to create. And to me, it's really a deregulatory thing because, with the Department of Health and RHAs, they're subject to different guidelines when it comes to their facility structures with a need for sprinklers and things of this nature. And so if we were to do a residential setting kind of a situation and regulate that, they wouldn't need the sprinklers and stuff. We would have to use commerce codes through them to do the codes there. But we could set this up and we could do it in a way, and we could put information around it and have us, some powers where we could go in and file injunctions to do different things. We have this with DID and mental health already right now. So there are things that we could do there. I think we should do something on it. I think, if you talk to Representative Eldridge, there's several. I know in Memphis, you guys have had issues. But in these residential homes right now, if it's underneath of that RHA guideline of I think, what is it, 4 or more, 5 or more, something like this. If it's underneath of that, it's not subject to regulation right now at all.
Thank you. And for the devoted remnant who are still here, thank you for your full attention. I'm sure everyone else is watching online or will go back and look. But Director Dunn, thank you. There's a huge population in Tennessee, a growing population. Some of us are going to be in it sooner rather than later. And we appreciate the work that is being done and, for that population. We are now back in session without objection. That does complete our calendar for today. We will reconvene Monday at 9 o'clock, where we will hear from the Department of Intellectual and Development Disabilities, followed by the Council on Developmental Disabilities, followed by Department of Mental Health, and then the Commission on Children and Youth and Children's Services. So we will see you here on Monday, and stay tuned. We may be looking at, because of popular demand and many revolts, we may be looking at rescheduling next Thursday's. Okay, just stay tuned. Stay tuned. But we will be here at 9 o'clock on Monday. We are adjourned.